The gospel, at least I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to use a prayer. It's a prayer of the Franciscan order that I really came across this week and I really liked, and I use that as kind of a four pieces, I suppose, of this sermon. And the prayer goes like this: May God bless us with restless discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may live deep within our hearts. May God bless us with holy anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that we may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless us with the gift of tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort them and turn their pain into joy. And may God bless us with enough foolishness to believe that we can make a difference in this world, so that we do what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all our children and the poor. So I'll have something to say on each of those sections. Feeling, as I told the 8 o'clock service, feeling a little melancholy. I've had 3 funerals for the last 3 Saturdays in a row. I have another one on Tuesday. And yesterday was Bill Mooney. Some of you may remember him. What a wonderful man. So I'm going to have some things to say about him. And anyway, I think that's the direction we're going to go. So let's have a moment of silent prayer that we can hear the word of the Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm not melancholy about Texas. Hook 'em horns. I realized something just yesterday, and it is that every time I've watched the Horns at Witten's Bar and Grill, they've lost. In fact, I went there to watch Ohio State and rooted for them. They lost. So I've decided the rest of the season, I'm going to Witten's Bar and Grill every Saturday, and I'm rooting for Oklahoma. Oh, well, I saw it just yesterday on the TV. I thought it was so horrible. Oklahoma's playing Oklahoma State, and I believe y'all won. Yes, yep. Anyway, they showed the crowd after a touchdown, and they're all doing this. I said, you're not even playing us. What's that about? The animosity between the scribes and Jesus is reaching a fever pitch, maybe somewhat like a rivalry between two groups. They have competing ways of looking at things. Jesus is like the Old Testament prophet who accuses them of devouring widows' houses, of doing everything just for show, about being hypocritical. It'll get even worse later on in the gospel, where he calls them a brood of vipers, whitewashed tombs, filled with dead bones on the inside. He'll accuse them of going 1,000 miles to get one convert, but neglect the person right next to them who's in need. Eventually, Jesus' critique of them will become so loud, I suppose, and so forceful that they'll do something about it. They'll strip him naked and nail him to a piece of wood to shut him up. But we know that's not the end of the story, because he'll come back and create a church that he hopes would live fully into its call to be there for the least and the lonely, for the widow and the orphan. The church at times has done that well. At other times we have fallen into that trap of hypocrisy. Now I'll just confess to you that I pastor up every day, and I might be downtown, and someone says, "Good morning, Father," and I kind of like that. Is that wrong? I don't know. It is wrong if I start to puff up with pride that somehow I'm different than everyone else, rather than just another person trying to follow a path in life that makes sense to me. But I do like to wear long robes. I don't say long prayers. I get a nice seat in the synagogue. Pastors in the past have abused their office. I try and teach our interns that it's a rare privilege to wear both the blessing and the burden of the stole, to enter into relationships with people that are deep and abiding, even if that means in the end pain and sorrow. The first petition of this prayer: may God bless us with restless discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may live deep within our hearts. Superficial relationships. I want to start with our relationship with God. I have two people that inspired me. One was my father, who had every reason to be proud, a world-recognized Reformation historian, a servant of the church, who served in parishes all over England, even in retirement, did ministry. He could have been puffed up with pride, but he had a deep humility because he understood that he was a sinner forgiven by God, set apart to do the works of service, that God worked through him despite himself. Bill Mooney was a man like that, who had a deep and abiding relationship with God, so that no matter what he suffered, no matter what he faced, he always came back to that understanding that God was present with him every step of the way. And he had a deep and abiding relationship with the love of his life, Mary, so that at the end of his life, we were standing around his bed, and Mary was holding his hand. The very last thing he did as he took that last breath of earth's air was to squeeze her hand, in a sense saying, I love you, don't be afraid. Now, I always talk at funerals about how the one who's passed away has gone on to glory and experiencing joy beyond imagination, beauty that cannot be described, love that's overwhelming. But what I said, I think for the first time in a funeral service in my entire career, what I said to Mary was, even though Bill is in heaven, he's missing you right now. That is a deep and abiding relationship that not many people are blessed to have in this life. But we are called to be in relationship with others in significant ways. I've often joked with my interns as we talk about our Myers-Briggs. It's a personality testing. I'm like an over-the-chart extrovert. And I tell them what that means is I like to have a lot of relationships and keep them all pretty superficial. Because it just tires me to be in a deep relationship. And yet I have been blessed in this place to have people that I know care about me, who let me know that I'm special to them. I've entered into relationships with people that I've walked right up to the end to bid Godspeed and farewell. We'll see you one day. Restlessness that we finally live into truth, like the hymn said that we sang. What have we to offer? What have we to give? Eyes that are wide open, lies that we won't live. And so we enter into a deep and abiding relationship with ourselves when we don't believe the worst about ourselves, because that's not true. And we don't believe the best about ourselves, because that's not true. We live somewhere in this middle ground. And we've got to finally become comfortable in our own skin. Because if we're not comfortable in our own skin, we will always be lonely. May God bless us with holy anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that we may work for justice, freedom, and peace. A holy anger, a righteous indignation, so that we become tired of seeing people on the streets who have nothing when we live in abundance. So we are angry that children are abused. So we are angry at poverty all around us, and homelessness and helplessness. And we are determined to do whatever we can do to make a difference, which is why we participate in Need, and Room in the Inn, and Mid-Cities Care Corps, and all the ministries that we do. Some of you, like me, might carry around in your vehicle a homeless help bag, so that when a person's asking for something, you can put it out the window. Here, these are things you need. A holy anger that leads to a righteous action to make this world look something like the world that's coming. May God bless us with the gift of tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort them and turn their pain into joy. The first veteran I ever met was the father of my next-door neighbor, Herman and Hertha Holstein. Do you think they're German? Anyway, Herman's father went off to World War I while Herman was in his mother's womb. And he came back from that terrible war to end all wars without his mind, because he'd been shell-shocked and gassed. And so they took him in. When I met him as a small child, maybe 7 years old, he just sat in a chair in their living room, not recognizing the son who took him in. That's the cost of war. And nobody wants peace more than veterans, or the people that we call to go into those places of horror, the ones that have to do the hard work, the sacrifice. We long for a day when this world will get over its warring madness. We somehow will learn to live in peace and harmony, so we no longer send young women and men off to the battlefield. Tears are healing. I didn't always know that. I remember when we got the phone call from the New York State Police that my grandfather had been killed by a drunk driver. We were at the dinner table. The phone rang. My dad never answers the phone during dinner, but he did that day, and then he got up. He went to my mother, and he told her, "Your father's been killed." I got up from the table, and I went into the bathroom to cry, because 14-year-old boys don't cry in front of other people. I'm so glad that at some point in my 20s, the tears just came and never stopped. There's healing in tears. Often when I'm faced with the trials that you go through, and hear of the tragedies and the sorrow, I reflect on that God is weeping with you. And when God's tears mingle with our tears, there is a holy healing that happens. We should not be afraid of our tears, but let them flow. You don't cry about someone you don't care about. So God weeps for this world. One day, the God who weeps for the world will stop crying and wipe away every tear from every eye. This is my favorite petition of all of them. And may God bless us with enough foolishness to believe that we can make a difference in this world, so that what we do others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all our children and all the poor. Foolish Christians, one and all, who believe that we can actually make a difference. I've got a new barista over at my Starbucks. His name is Stevie. It's taken a while for him to get up to speed. He's a very young man, and he seems always very distracted when all I really want is my tall, bold coffee, right, as soon as possible. But we've gotten to know each other. And so now we're talking and relating to each other, and it's really been good to see him kind of now really get into his role, and I really enjoy him. So we were talking about coffee the other day. They've got the Christmas blend up already. Like we had Thanksgiving blend, for 1 week.